Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Ivan Rodrigues, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you today. As a tsunami of disruptions rising from the global economic slowdown and the COVID-19 pandemic inundated global economies, the Times of India Group has taken the responsibility of rewiring our understanding of world in flux through the India Leadership Series, a series of interactions with stalwarts across industries spanning over 60 days in collaboration with ServiceNow. Today's industry panel discussion with CEOs from the Indian IT and ITeS sector, titled Democratizing IT Systems for Digital Switchover, will focus on immediate challenges, opportunities, and decisions required to steer the sector out of choppy waters, with an aim to revitalize one of the greatest economies in the world. Doyens from the sector will deliberate not just on what it will take to navigate through this crisis, but also shed light on what companies in this sector will need to do to emerge victorious in a new world order. And so, without further ado, it's an honor and privilege for me to welcome the esteemed members of this power-packed Roundtable panel. Ashwin Yardley, Chief Executive Officer, Capgemini; Nandakumar, President and Chief Executive Officer at Suntech Business Solutions; Rizwan Koita, Co-founder and Chief Executive Officer at CITES Tech; Sapnesh Lalla, Chief Executive Officer at NIIT; Sumit Sood, Chief Executive Officer APAC at Global Logic; and Venugopal Arcot, fondly known as Venu, Senior Director, Solution Consulting at ServiceNow. This panel will be moderated by Pooja Jain, anchor at Times Network. Pooja, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Ivan. And I believe I speak for everyone in saying that it's a pleasure to be a part of this series with the Economic Times. Now, it's been said that digital transformation is helping create a more profitable, a more equitable, and a more secure world economy. But how so? And does this democratization or this equal access to technology necessarily translate to equal opportunity? Well, it's a complex question, and it deserves to be approached from a 360-degree perspective. And fortunately, I'm joined by a highly distinguished panel of domain experts to help me do just that. So to kick things off, I'd love to point my first question to Sapnesh, and that is, sir, what do you believe are some of the most blatant vulnerabilities in the global IT ecosystem that the COVID-19 outbreak has now brought to bear?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
So, any disruption, any change exposes vulnerabilities. And I think what COVID has exposed is two. One, a dependence on key talent. And second, the expectation that this talent needs to transform themselves to just stay relevant. And then, as you pointed out, to improve profitability, equity, and so on and so forth, the talent has to transform themselves. And that's really hard because for many who've been doing the same thing or the same way of doing things for many, many years, for them to realize that what they knew all along and what worked all along does not make sense anymore, that is a very significant and substantial change. And I think organizations who are participating in digital transformation are learning how to adapt themselves. What we found, we did a lot of research on figuring out what creates an adaptable organization or an adaptable learning organization. I think there were 2-3 things that stood out. One, an organization needs to have the capability to sense that disruption or change is in the offing. Figuring it out after it's happened doesn't really help them. So they have to be able to sense that change is in the offing or disruption is in the offing. Second, this may sound like the most obvious thing, they have to be able to adapt themselves to change. That means they have to have not just the ability to sense, but also the courage to make change and maybe make change ahead of when it is needed.
Sure.
I think the third is to be able to make bets. And I think in our research, which interestingly enough, we concluded in January of 2020, it did sort of enable us to foretell who might be successful through this pandemic. We were not hoping that the pandemic will strike, but we knew that there was change coming. And I think those three things are, you can say, the key opportunities, but also the key vulnerabilities. If you're not able to sense, if you're not able to adapt, and if you're not able to bet, then you might not be able to, move forward and still be relevant.
Well, Sapnesh, thank you for so wonderfully setting the context. And that actually makes for a great segue to my next question, which is to you, Nanda. And that is, what are some of the leading challenges and the most formidable challenges that organizations today face in the context of managing their technology footprint specifically?
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and thank you for having me here. And one of the fundamental, we work with some of the largest financial organizations across the globe, right from Australia to North America. And they were one of the, voracious adopters of technologies in the past, of course, with a lot of legacy leading with that. So I'm even talking within the context of them, forget about people who are not even transitioned to the digital technology. Now, everybody talking about digital transformation, I just want to put that into the right context. We need to all understand that the whole economic space is moving from the physical world to the virtual world. So that's the whole digital transformation. This is just to put the things in context. So when that is happening, one of the fundamental thing is that what kind of technologies we are going to choose. It is not lack of technologies. Technologies are available, was available for almost 20 years. We've been preaching about digital transformation for almost 20 years. That was our nature of business. That is the kind of product we create. So number one was, it's not like the right technology. The most important thing is the cloud environments and things like that. So that is, if I put the number one, people adopting that kind of flexible environment. And today, the beautiful thing is that the technology stack, any kind of technology stack is available. It's all about choosing what is relevant to you. So if I would say number one problem is problem of plenty, but choosing the right thing, right?
Sure.
That is starting with. Then transitioning the technology. People have legacies which bind them to the ground and they can't move, but forgetting that and moving that in a progressive manner. Choosing the strategy of transformation is the next most important aspect. And then, of course, that conversation is coming. And within that, then choosing the right technologies or algorithms that help you to manage your business based on your nature of business and the customer base. I just put it at 3. There are a lot more, but I just, the talent aspect has already been spread by Spanish. That is one of the biggest challenges in all this transformation.
Well, Rizwan, building on what Nanda has said, managing one's technology footprint as an organization, of course, it is time intensive, but it is also capital intensive. It can certainly detract from the day-to-day operations of the business. That said, amidst all this, has digital transformation emerged as sort of a one-size-fits-all solution? Your thoughts?
So, I'll just start by saying that, the word digital transformation today is probably the most used and in some ways the most abused word in the industry.
Absolutely.
Because it could mean anything and you could pretty much take any initiative and you can garb it under the umbrella of digital transformation and try and justify it. What I would suggest to, customers as well as the audience here is, we need to simplify the narrative and move away from using, technical jargon like AI, ML, analytics, big data, whatever, to really talk about, what are the key business processes that really are processes that make our organization truly unique, and which are the processes which are just must do to get any function or any organization to run in a useful manner. So for example, human resources is a function that is required in every organization, finance is required, but depending on the organization, there are some processes which fundamentally define who you are and what you want to be really good at. So for example, if I look at CITeS Tech, we are a tech services company, and I could argue that talent supply chain management, right from recruitment, training, onboarding, is the core skill that really defines our scalability over the next 5 years, right? So that is that core process. A lot of other stuff that we do is important, but I will not personally put my teams to build quote unquote digital transformation solutions. I will buy off the shelf products for everything else because I just don't have the time to focus on it. And my investments from a technology perspective in building technology will be focused around areas that are core to us. Similarly, if you're a manufacturing company and you believe that supply chain optimization is important, then that is where you would put in a lot of your incremental dollars to really optimize, and other stuff that you need to do within the organization, you just do on a business as usual basis. So you have to almost look at what are every organization, depending on your business, has 2-3 processes which fundamentally define who you are and are a source of your competitive advantage. If we can't put disproportionate amount of capital behind that, then you always run the risk of taking too many initiatives on board, trying to do little, and then spending a lot of money, but not necessarily moving the needle because one got caught up in a lot of jargon in some ways. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I would start by looking at what is truly unique about our business and what differentiates us, and then taking whatever limited capital we have and giving those areas of our business a disproportionate amount of attention. So that's how I would answer that question, Pooja. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Ashwin, Rizwan just mentioned must-haves versus nice-to-haves, which leads me to ask you, what do today's customers care most about? Is it truly digital transformation? Is it cost optimization? Is it smooth and seamless 24/7 operations? What's the solution here? What's most pivotal to them?
So if you look at technology consumption over the years, I think it's significantly shifted for being a cost play to being actually the core of revenue for most of the customers now. And that's why probably I believe there is a huge focus on digital transformation. Traditionally, it was financial services or telecom industries which used technology as core to the product. Now, if you look at it, and I have my fellow colleagues, so CITeS Tech or several others, for several of them, technology is core to the product. And I'll just share a couple of examples which illustrates the point.
Please.
We work with one of our customers, which is in tire business. Traditionally, they used to sell very large OTRs, tires, off the road equipment, like you have for a big crane or some of those equipments. And then each of them is probably $500,000 worth of a tire. Okay, it's so expensive. Now, the important shift they've done is instead of selling tire, they have moved to a model where they sell tire as a service. And how do they do that? There is a lot of sensors which are inbuilt in the tire. So they know how often or what's the frequency or what is the wearing of that tire, how many revolutions it has done. They're then using, some analytics to predict when the tire needs to be changed. And then they have a maintenance schedule. So all of this using technology such as Internet of Things, analytics, they've shifted from moving to a physical product to product tire as a service. And today it's one of their most profitable business lines. Okay. Second example, if I have to share, in operations, again, and probably COVID accentuated it. Several plants require maintenance again, and typically, there are certain machines which require very high-end skills, and these are very few people. And sometimes, if you take a rig, it's an offshore operation. So you need the best person to be sent to offshore. Now, if you look at COVID, you couldn't have done it. Okay. What really helped a lot of these companies is they've already built solutions using augmented reality, virtual reality. So you can actually be having a cockpit sitting in a Mumbai office and guiding the on-site team, whichever it is, even if they're not experts on an offshore rig, to help them maintain the entire plant or the rig. So these are just some examples which show there has been a huge shift of technology being a cost saver to technology being the core part of product. And that's what you see almost getting all pervasive, driving the whole transformation or digital transformation, if you want to say it that way.
Well, Ashwin, thank you so much for putting your examples in the form of use cases. That makes the conversation all the more tangible, I have to say. And switching gears now, and I pose my next question to Sumit. A prevailing perception in the market is that migrating one's existing systems to the cloud is an expensive exercise and it requires a complete infrastructural overhaul. To what extent is that true? And how is this perception or perhaps misconception shaping how companies now do business?
So very, very relevant and pertinent question. And it goes back to what Rizwan was talking about earlier, right? You got to prioritize what you're trying to do and focus on what is the core of your business. For a tire company, like what Ashwin was saying, heavy equipment, expensive tires, is managing a bunch of servers sitting in a data center core to that business? I would say no. I mean, these are mining engineers, I'm sure these are, or oil rig, oil platform engineers. The culture and the ethos and the heart of the company is not in managing IT farms and servers. So to push it to the cloud where you can focus on your core is, in my mind, it really goes back to something that was written in the 80s or 90s, right? I remember a book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, right? Top 5, top 3 of 5. What are the organization's top 5 priorities? What are their top 3 differentiating levers? If technology is one of them, makes sense. If not, push it out, move it to the cloud, and let somebody else run it for you. So in my mind, when you look at the confluence, you're talking about the customer experience part to one of our panelists, right? There are only so many things that the organization can do. And if IT is not in the top 3, push it out and just get it done with. Whether it needs a lot of capital, I think that is debatable in terms of, do you have the right talent to architect the enterprise network and the architecture and the applications? I think the jury is out there. There are enough examples of highly efficient, and this is where India's Jugaad innovation really fits in. I remember a conversation with one of my industry colleagues. He's now retired at SBI Life. And they said, we take 3x the juice out of our IT systems than our European partner who run the same platform, but they spend three times more horsepower than us on getting the same computing done. So I think having the confluence of the right talent focus is important. I don't think it necessarily needs to cost more. You just got to have the right partner to work with and get it sorted. There are enough.
Please, sir. Yes.
No, I'm saying there are enough examples of success. I spoke about, as I said, from one of my dear friends from SBI Life days. And there are enough. I say, look at the Indian enterprise. Don't look west on this. Look at the Indian enterprises. Look at the Jugaad innovation there. You'll find enough examples of success.
Oh, all right. A bit of a nation building spirit here, which is always good to hear, and a fresh perspective. And with that, I come to you, Venugopal. And I'd love to know, how do you believe management teams should go about evaluating digital transformation strategies, specifically from an investment versus outcome perspective?
Sure, Pooja. I think the inputs today spoken by all the elite panelists is about relevance, cloud adoption, digital transformation, whether used, misused, or technological cost versus revenue. And there are implications. If I want to talk about, Ashwin, you just mentioned, we had a customer, an airline, where 80% down revenue, 20% workforce reduction, becoming core part of the nervous system of the entire operations, makes our business much more relevant. And being on the cloud helps it keeps on running. And hence, there need to be a method to the madness in terms of how we make those choices. And choice was also made, mentioned by NK, how the affordability is there, and how we can make those choices. Now, I should reflect when we make those choices. I want to reflect on, we call it as walk the talk, what we do in ServiceNow and what our CIO does in terms of making those decisions. And that builds trust when we walk the talk, when we do it internally within us and then prescribe to our customers. What do we do that? When we say what our CIO did was to go back to or talk to all the CEOs and understand what's that three things that would be impacting them in terms of making those decisions. And they said, A, velocity. Velocity means because of the changing times, we got to bring in whatever you do with agility and speed. Because the business process needs to be transformed. And the second one was experience. And experience, Smith also mentioned about experience, internal and external. How do we bring that experience for employees and customers and all together a similar experience to all of them? While bringing these changes, how do we ensure that the intelligence is captured? We can call it as AI, ML and other areas, but intelligence is the larger prerogative here in terms of measuring these velocity and experience, putting forward customer at the front end. And these three imperatives, when measured across all departments, whether it is HR, finance, and all these personas, it could be CHRO, CFO, and everybody else, making their lives easier, those personas. And today in these times, we see as much as CEOs involved in visioning and execution as well, along with their teams to make this progress happen. That is encouraging. So these three imperatives, focusing on departments and making transformations as is necessary, using this methodology, which we call it as digital transformation journeys, from heat map to roadmap.
Well, Sapnesh, taking a cue from Venugopal's comments, how have the priorities of today's CIO and CTO truly changed? On the one hand, they seem firmly focused on reducing maintenance costs when it comes to their IT strategies. But on the other hand, they, of course, are equally focused on mitigating IT risks. So how difficult is it to strike that balance?
I'll comment on this predominantly from a talent perspective, because that's where our expertise is. And I think talent has always been in the top 10 list of a CIO or a CTO, but it has suddenly become a top 2 or top 3 in their list. And I think someone mentioned about talent pipeline or a tech supply chain management, but I think different words for the same issue. I think key talent has become critically important. And I think CIOs who in the past would look at predominantly talent from a technology perspective. And of course, digital technologies are a key priority. I mean, talent who has digital capabilities are critically important. But I think more and more we talk to our customers, we also realize that it's just not that. It is, how do you enable digital behaviors? So the role of customer experience management, the role of user experience, how do you create experiences which are friction-free? That has become critically important from a tech talent perspective, as well as digital behaviors. How do you enable organizations to communicate with each other, with their customers or with their partners digitally in a wholesome way, so that you are retaining the benefits that used to accrue when you were able to do physical communication, but then using technology add or bring additions. For example, one of our very large customers in pharmaceuticals, they used to have a challenge with physical meetings because they could bring only 1 or 2 or maybe 3 people to a meeting. But then when the pandemic hit, it actually opened opportunities for them. They were able to now coordinate and orchestrate a team of 10 folks with different levels of expertise and bring those to the meeting to have a more wholesome meeting. Now, the CIO and the CTO also had a key role to play to enable that. to enable the scheduling, to enable the ways of working, to enable the technology. So I think, digital talent is not just to do with technology talent. It has to do with technology, behavior, design, and so on and so forth. And I think from a CIO or a CTO's perspective, that's instead of being one of the top 10 items, has become one of the top 2 or 3.
Well, NK, we've talked talent there for a minute. Now let's talk technology. So the underlying goal of any company's technology strategy, presumably, is to increase ROI and to improve, the organization's most critical business functions. So what role are new age technologies like artificial intelligence, big data, and machine learning playing in this whole equation towards accomplishing this end goal? NK, over to you.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute.
No
Yeah.
problem.
So just now it has highlighted the fact that these digital ecosystems or digital substrate is one of the fundamental need is the bringing in the intelligence required for your business into that substrate, right? So we need to understand that once we move from the physical world to the digital world, the touch point, the experience, everything is through the digital channel. So these fabrics, I will put this analytics or artificial intelligence and going up to the cognitive level, is the fabric of building that intelligence into that substrate, into that environment. So it's very, very fundamental. But most important thing to remember is about choosing the kind of capability which you need. It need to be starting with what is your number one priorities, and starting with that. Maybe it is how do I decide what product to sell, to what is my customer feeling about my product, or how do I optimize my cost of creating the product, right? From every element of your, what you call the value creation of your whole business space, each of those segments needs its own algorithms. It is that complex. So you can't do all that together. So do it in a systematic manner from your priority point of view, all the way to managing your infrastructure. So it's a new world out there that need to be completely explored, and it is going to be evolving. So number one answer to your question, it is very, very fundamental to the digital world. So that is the world of tomorrow, of how you differentiate your business, how you become competent in your marketplace. And its complexities are even becoming more dynamic, more exponential in its nature by the simple fact that the world is going to be more connected, more conscious, and more value-based businesses, which is going to be evolving. So there's no more empirical computations. You also need to bring in cognitive and emotional computation into the space. And
Sure.
that is the dimension in which the technology is already moving. So this is the kind of picture I see, what is evolving and is already happening. It's bits and pieces, but it is going, the positive side of it, that it can accelerate very fast, and because the computing and the capabilities are getting enhanced, it is also scary on the other side. So I'll leave it at that point for the time.
Fair enough.
Happy to have more deeper questions.
Sorry to interrupt, Pooja. Can I build a little bit on what NK said? He triggered a very interesting thought.
Absolutely, Sumit. Absolutely.
And because look, what tech is doing, it's not just in the enterprise. Building upon what NK was talking about, the relevance for the enterprise, look at the whole social aspect of it, right? So if from the 1970s to today, over the last 50 years, as an example, we no longer have a food problem, right? We grow enough calories on the planet to feed everybody.
Right.
We have a distribution problem. We have pockets of our population that are going hungry and pockets of our population that have a surplus. And we've always said the future is dark but bright. And by dark, we've said DARQ, right? Distributed ledgers, artificial intelligence, virtual augmented reality, and quantum computing. I believe all of the new age technologies, as they get more and more pervasive and mainstream in the enterprises, the amount of social activism that is happening inside the enterprises, they will actually help solve a lot of our our current challenges as humanity, whether it's climate, whether it's food security, whether it's shelter. I believe that the time has come, and then this decade is going to be a watershed decade for this newest tech to take us beyond just the enterprise frontier to actually help solve some of our challenges and lay the foundation for the future.
Absolutely. And that really makes for a nice transition to my next question, which is to Rizwan. And that is that demystifying some of these technologies is going to perhaps be the most critical step towards achieving mass adoption. So that said, what more would you like to see from both the public and the private sector? How can they perhaps work in tandem, in conjunction, to make that happen? Rizwan, over to you.
Sorry, I just needed to unmute myself. So I was just saying, there's been in the earlier part of the conversation, we spoke about how just picking up only a few battles and trying to win them is better than trying to go across the board, because it is too complicated, otherwise for any organization. Similarly, I would make a case that if one knows what to do, then there are, at a very, very simplistic level, 3 approaches that one can take. One is you go out and look for what is sort of the a packaged product or the out of the shelf, sort of a COTS product that you could go and just buy. Because obviously there are lots of very, very, intelligent people around the world trying to codify a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, right? So there are existing products out there that one could buy. They, on the face of it, may seem very expensive, but you have to put in the context of the second and the third option that I'm going to come to in a moment. The second option is that you get somebody to build it for you, because it is complicated to try and do it in-house.
Right.
The third option is that you actually set up an in-house team to build something. Okay. And the only caution that I have is that if you are taking an in-house team, or you're building a in-house team in some of these newer areas of technology, what we've seen, unfortunately, is that these tend to be smaller teams. And these are teams where they will end up eventually being a very small number of people. You can probably count on one hand or one set of fingers, 5-7 individuals who will become extremely proficient in what you're doing, right, in some ways. And after they've solved that problem, odds are that to retain that talent internally becomes extremely hard, right? So then you either have to have it kind of goes back to the point that, Sapnesh was mentioning, right, that it's essentially, it's not a technical discussion at that point. It is a much more of a human resources discussion, where do you have as an organization the ability to be able to attract and retain that kind of talent on a long-term basis? Or are you trying to do this in-house and creating a huge, sort of a risk factor? It may not be an obvious risk factor, but if 3 individuals in your company know the secret sauce of what is truly important for the company, then that is a huge risk factor for the organization. Or you try and partner with another organization that does it at scale, and therefore, they have their own internal ways of managing and de-risking from a people perspective. But fundamentally, to be able to do this right, you have to ask tough questions. Do I really need to build it, or can I buy something off the shelf, even if it's expensive? Do I have to build it in-house, or do I partner with somebody? And if I'm going to build it in-house, some of these cutting edge tools, do I have the ability to be able to attract and retain the small team that will be required, which will end up building a disproportionate amount of intellectual property? And what is the organizational risk around that? So I think those are some of the factors in my mind, which are almost as important as, technology choices and the tools that one is using, which honestly, we will talk about there.
Yeah, phenomenal. And, Ashwin, my next question comes to you. And I'd like to sort of hone in on connecting the dots between analytics and technology decision-making. So if you were to look inwards, within the 4 walls of your organization, how have you leveraged analytics to become a more resilient organization backed by actionable business insights?
It's a very relevant question. And, being from a technology organization, I think it's important we drink our own champagne, So I want to just share a few things. And again, it's a very common, or at least to certain parts of IT business. See, today, in IT, one of the most important part is about the whole talent supply chain, from hiring to training to deployment to retention. And there are many interesting ways we use AI, and I'm pretty sure a lot of my fellow colleagues use it. See, today in COVID world or even otherwise, a lot of the selection process is virtual. Okay, so you're doing interviews virtual. There's enough technology available to do it. But what was interesting and what is important is, number one, when you're shortlisting a candidate, how do you use the right attributes and look at the candidate's demographics to be sure that that candidate is the right candidate mutually. We may want the candidate may not want us. Okay, so how do you ensure you're first starting with the right shortlisted candidate? And we use a lot of AI parameters to figure that out. The second part of that process is when you interview. It's not about what and when you interview. What we also see, unfortunately, in the COVID situation is when you're doing all of this virtually, you do have cases where there is an amount of impersonification when it's not Ashwin who's actually doing the interview, but somebody else is doing the interview on my behalf. Okay, how do you avoid it? How do you detect it? And again, you can use a lot of AI analytics to figure out the impersonification. Okay, once the candidate has joined and has spent time with you, one of the key things again for all of us in IT industry is how do you continue to develop them?
Right.
Again, we see what is the background, what projects the individual has worked, what are their skills, and then see what is the right career map for the individual. All of this is leveraging the right AI. Then it's about deployment. Again, when we deploy, you want the best fit for the best project. Okay, again, what are the needs of the project? So you look at the job descriptions, build certain attributes to it, and you map with people who are going to be available. I might have the best person today, but is not available, versus I might have somebody who's 90% fit, but available today. So how do you do this matching? Again, AI analytics comes into play. And lastly, one of the most challenging areas for all of us in IT is how do you retain, how do you predict attrition? Again, based on the surveys we do, based on the behavior internally or externally, there is enough models which have been built in industry to plan and predict retention or attrition issues. So if you look at this, we use in different ways, different levels of maturity, AI analytics for the entire core supply chain of our business, which is talent. Just one example, there are many other examples where AI analytics is core to how the business is run.
Sure, absolutely. And again, putting it in tangible use cases really tells the story well. So thank you for that. And with that, Sumit, I take my next question to you. And I'd love your view on which countries or communities or, corporates for that matter, do you believe have set the benchmark when it comes to creating truly sustainable and scalable models of delivering IT support? Sumit, over to you.
Sorry, I'd forgotten to unmute my line. So lots of them, Pooja. Look, and I would still say I would divide this into two parts, right? I would divide this into the pre-cloud or the pre-digital revolution that has been accelerated dramatically by COVID, and the post world.
Sure.
I think in the post world, the jury is out there. I don't think anybody has figured it out cleanly as yet. Everybody is scrambling. Sapnesh spoke more so, and the challenges there are not about the technology. The challenges there are truly around talent and applying or making sense of that technology. The technology revolution is happening at such a fast and furious pace that decision making and applying that in the enterprise and then supporting it, that journey is still slightly ahead of us. In the next 12, 18 months, we'll call out. If I take it back to the pre-COVID era, in the traditional IT support models, if you look at the enterprise world, the banking financial services sector had got it pretty sorted. Look, when you're running transactions that need to go through in a truly democratic manner, be accessible across the globe with no delays, then the sort of support that you need for those systems, what we call the 5.9 availability, 99.999, and even that 5.9 is mostly expected to be 6 or 7 with hardly a few minutes of downtime a year. I would say the banking world sort of led the pack. And to be honest, organizations like Capgemini, which were actually out there supporting some of those banks, they did hats off. They've done a tremendous job in that sector. You take the industrial powerhouses like JCI as an example, and the likes of Hitachi Vantara as a support partner for those folks. They've done a phenomenal job. So yes, there are many examples. I think banking sector is the most pervasive one because technology became so fundamental to the way they ran their business.
Right.
And then the service providers who were associated with the banking sector. Those I would say would be the leaders of the pack who got it all figured out in the pre-COVID era. I think in the post-COVID era, we still are all trying to make sense of this fast and furious pace of change, adopting it, helping our customers make sense of it, and then figuring out. I think it'll emerge over the next 3 or 4 years, which organizations beat the pack and get it all sorted.
Sure. And Venugopal, in this post-COVID era, for any IT organization, broadly speaking, how critical are its India operations to its overall growth strategy?
Pooja, not just the IT organization, for any organization for that matter, I think we've heard so many leaders talk about talent. It is the rise of the talent. And this rise of the talent evolves in terms of how we can mature this, leverage these talents into different dimensions of the organizational contribution. In ServiceNow, we have our own R&D center in Hyderabad and Bangalore, product development, customer services, you name it. Because as one of the leaders in other forums, they said that India is not just the backbone, but also the brains. But added to this combination makes it much more interesting because these talents are leveraged not just about managing availability and other areas around IT, but also in terms of leveraging, optimizing automation in the business processes of logistics, supply chain, to finance, to procurement, and any of the departments. And in this very important area, we call as global business service or whatever, the most important area is about understanding that it is a connected enterprise. Whether it is somebody joining or leaving or retaining, it's the connected enterprise within the enterprise or beyond the enterprise. It is one enterprise. How do we ensure that it is connected? And I would like to borrow this quote mentioned in the previous meeting by Nandakumar. He said, collaboration is the competition of the future. And that is a very powerful one in the connected enterprise. How do we ensure that there is frictionless movement of work flowing between departments and enterprises? That's the challenge, and we are trying to address that, Pooja.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of a frictionless work environment, my next question goes to the entire panel, and I'll kick it off with Satnesh. The mental and physical well-being of employees, it continues to fall squarely on management's shoulders, and perhaps more so in a work-from-home environment. So how has technology come to your rescue in this regard?
That's a very interesting question. I think we are dealing with it every day and more so. But I think two ways in which technology has helped. But before going to how technology has helped, I would like to mention the human side of it first, because the technology has helped enable the human side of it. I think one of the most important things I saw happening, at least at NIIT, and I think at many of our customers as well, was that people chose to become more empathetic, chose to become more caring, chose to believe that ensuring that each one is taken care of and is treated as a person. Those things became very important to people. And if a pandemic got us to believe that, then it's sad, but it did. And I think we have to do everything we can to sustain. I know it took a lot of adrenaline during the pandemic to get it to where it was. But I think we have to ensure that it doesn't wear off. And I think that's where technology enables people to come together. I mean, I think if you look at a number of situations where people are able to interact with technology to make a lot of choices. For example, there are e-commerce journeys where you're able to buy things worth $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. Now, technology enables you to make those choices, gives you a rich set of experiences that make you trust the technology and enable you to make those choices. I think in the same way, we have to push the boundaries of technology to enable us to make human-to-human connections and enable humans to express themselves and be able to take action based on how they express themselves. I think that's critical. I think the other thing that technology does really, really well is to keep you honest. If you tell technology, and I think ServiceNow does that, Salesforce does that, if you decide that you should do a set of things in a certain way, at a certain frequency, with a certain set of people, it enables that happens. So I think technology, companies need to become human again, and I think they did. I think most organizations did become human and to their benefit. But I think staying human and using the help of technology to stay human is going to be the big deal.
NK, I welcome your thoughts here. Do you echo Sapnish's sentiments, which is that technology is essentially helping foster trust and transparency?
Absolutely. In fact, Sapnesh was right from the beginning talking about the talent aspect of it. I mean, very fundamental nature of our business is it is human intellect driven, right? I mean, so right from the well-being of your employees all the way to the operational experience. Be it is, for example, we switched over to working from home the very first day because incidentally we were doing a business continuity plan exercise 1 week before, and the lockdown happened end of that week. So we were just practicing how we would be working in such a situation. I mean, that's what happened to us. So going back to that, within 2 days, we were 100% operational. I mean, of course, we had challenges of weekend tokens and things like that. I also want to contextualize a little bit. We are a product organization, so we build product for the banks. So we have to, and it's a very critical part of their revenue part of it. It's very business sensitive. So we had a lot of sensitivity in dealing with that, our environment. So the security and the secure connectivities and all that. Now, technology, right from technology providers, right from things like, I mean, I was amazed by our telco providers. They were even being able to give us dedicated connectivity by which somebody switches on, it will only connect to that port. To that level, we could go down to, I'm just giving you the nuances of it. But what's more important is how do it is still evolving. How do you make, post-COVID, one thing I'm 100% certain, we are not going back to the pre-COVID world, right? There is going to be a hybrid. That's why the question which even I asked you, what would you, even as a journalist, would you go to office every other day? The point is going to be it's a hybrid environment which is going to be in the future. In that case, how do you empower people to be independent at the same time collaborating? So in my mind, the thing which is really the technology helping is the collaborating ecosystem. The technology which is making collaboration much more possible. I can sit down in any part of the, today I'm in a virtual environment, I'm in Dubai today. From here, I can connect right from Australia all the way to in a flip of a second. I mean, I'm being with my colleague from one part to the North America in 2 seconds, right? And we can all be in one part. So it is not about enabling, it is actually exponentially enhancing the possibility of what we as humans can do. Sumit, touched upon the point of it is the turning point for the mankind. The kind of capabilities and potential it's going to create what is called as the connected mind of the conscious mind of the future. I will leave it with that heavy word at this point of time. And right from the well-being all the way to operational, the technology just becoming a substrate.
Can I give a contrary answer to the one which is being
Please, we'd love that.
Yes, please. Go ahead, please.
So I would say that technology, the biggest benefit it has given us is it has made us location independent, So going back to NK's point, he's sitting in Dubai, we are all sitting in our own homes. The fact that we can organize this event, which would otherwise have been, for some people, a 2-day commitment, will now become a 90-minute commitment, is just phenomenal, right? So I look at my employee base, and I know there are a few folks from CITES Tech on the call, so I have to be sensitive to what I'm going to say. But the reality is, right, that you could be working at CITES Tech at, I'm just going to pick a number, a 12 lakh per year compensation in Mumbai, traveling for 2 hours in a local train, then taking a bus to come to my office, which takes another 30 minutes. So you're spending 3 hours. And now that same individual is now sitting in Nasik or Jalgaon, right, at home with no cost of travel, no cost of rent, no cost of food, and is a purchasing power which is different in Nasik or Jalgaon compared to Mumbai. So and the compensation is the same, maybe even a meaningful raise because we gave healthy raises this year. So it is a huge personal impact to that individual which technology has enabled, right, which is all positive. There is a negative side to technology, right? Everything that a person is doing now is online. There is constant monitoring to some extent happening. Now there is constant use of social media for communication, etc. Right? So I just think that as the nature of the freedom from location, I think, is real, okay, which is just fundamental to what has happened in the last 18 months. All the other stuff that is happening on technology, I think we are using more tools. But whether those tools are good for us or not good for us is purely based on the individual preferences of what we choose and organizational preferences of what they want to do. I don't think the tools themselves are good or bad for individuals. They can actually be quite bad because, you could now be sitting on your desk, for 12 to 14 hours a day and doing stuff which otherwise, will eventually get you into trouble because, you will suffer from some kind of fatigue, mental, physical, whatever, right? Because of lack of movement. So those are the kinds of things that we just have to be careful. So there is something which is fundamentally good and something which are just new tools. We just need to get better at using them, and if we misuse it, it will be to our detriment.
Right. And Ashwin, I give the floor to you, given that technology continues to be as much about people as it does processes, as it does preferences, as Rizwan just mentioned.
So, frankly, the most impactful area where, from a well-being perspective, we actually saw big relevance and need in technology was actually healthcare, something probably what you would have seen, Rizwan, in your business. As we all know, the second wave of COVID was quite intense, and we did have a share of our employees who were affected or their families. And one of the most important things which we could help them with is, a remote medical care infrastructure. The good thing is it's quite evolving and maturing even in India. So we work with several startups like Pochia or Medibuddy or even Glocal to tie up with them to provide medical care during COVID times. And if there is one thing which we did, and which people really loved was that support. You needed help. You couldn't step out. How could you reach? You can't reach the doctor. How could the doctor reach you? And I felt that the medical infrastructure, the whole transformation of medical tech in the virtual world has been immense. In fact, not only that we used it for our employees, but as a part of our CSR program, what we got to know is, especially taking the case of Maharashtra, rapidly all of us invested, built in infrastructure in the big cities. So we contributed and many other our peers contributed for oxygen plants or ICU beds in the main cities. The challenge is, what do you do with a remote town or a city?
Right.
And again, there are startups, there is medical technology which is available, The challenge in those places is not the physical infrastructure. The challenge is the manpower infrastructure. There isn't a specialist there. If there is a pulmonary disease, there isn't a specialist in the city of Bede. Okay. We deployed, and again, it was some of the partners we worked with. We deployed a full-fledged remote ICU bed infrastructure. So it was not physical. It was all, of course, there were some physical things in those hospitals, but what their need was how you could leverage the expertise of a doctor sitting in a Mumbai, maybe a KEM hospital or a Sion hospital, to the patient sitting in a Bede hospital who needs pulmonary intervention. So I think the biggest help we could do to our employees and society was leveraging health tech. And last thing, I think one of the things, to somewhere build on what Rizwan said, is one of the most important thing from an emotional support or other supports to leverage technology is actually get off it for certain part of the day. Okay, so we try to do it saying we will not do any calls after X point of time because we work global. So, several of our employees work 24/7 almost. So I think somewhere to stop using technology was also important relief.
Sure. Absolutely. I think you've summed it up quite well. It's something very relatable there. And with that, Sumit, I give the floor over to you for your comments.
I look at this whole situation as in two parts: the digital bridge and the digital divide. Right? There's enough tech available for us to do transactions, and I think that's phenomenal. Right? Businesses have been running. It has facilitated the situation like Ashwin was just mentioning around remote healthcare. It has accelerated a lot of that stuff, which is phenomenal, and enough's been said about that. However, I also see these interactions as one across the digital divide. I mean, imagine this: if all of us were actually together, we would have probably broken bread together or have had a cup of tea together. The small bond that you form with that is radically different from half inch by half inch on a screen that we are to each other right now.
Very much so. Right.
I think that's the digital divide. I also believe tech probably will get the answer. The Avatar movie and those digital avatars that were there, they will probably become real. 5 years from now, this conversation, we might be at our homes, but our avatars might be sitting together at a table and sharing a cup of coffee and building those bonds with those memories and those emotions that come back to us in our physical being.
Sure.
That story is ahead of us. As a techie, I'm very confident that will happen. Mm-hmm. But right now, I would say the two parts: the digital bridge, phenomenal. We can do transactions, but massive digital divide when it comes to building bonds and building that human and social capital. And as the way the human brains are wired, we need that. That is a challenge that we need to solve for fairly quickly, either by getting back in pockets together or by figuring out other alternate tech solutions.
Absolutely. And, Venugopal, I want to give you the floor now here. The question is slightly different for you. And, I'll give you the last word. Given that the twin threats of lives versus livelihoods, that very much continues to loom large. So what do you believe are some of the market forces and the macroeconomic factors that have the most potential to revolutionize the IT ecosystem going forward? Your thoughts?
I think for a moment, Sumit put me on a imaginary mode. I wish there was an avatar. But lives and livelihood are very important aspects. And what I've heard, and it's personal to me, is about the purpose drives much beyond anything else. Like in ServiceNow, we call it as we make the world work better for people. And we really mean by saying so. And when each of our employees take that personally, then it becomes important for us to contribute in many different dimensions. And if I want to dissect the W's of the work, or where to work, when to work, who of the work, and what of work, and there is a lot of lives and livelihood that can double click into each of the points that is elicited today. There is a need to introspect, but also on the other side is in terms of be prescriptive about the journey we take. The journey we take in terms of speed and agility are going to transform comparatively. The intelligence is going to drive in a very different dimension altogether. And after all, experience when you're working in a collaborative environment between Gen X, Y, Z, then experience plays a very important role in retaining and maintaining your talents. So these are some of my thoughts. Pooja, over to you. Thank you.
Well, I think that makes for a wonderful note upon which to close. And I really have to thank my panelists for sharing such a rich range of perspectives from their personal and professional journeys. So thank you for that. I truly walk away from this talk with a lot of nuggets of wisdom, and I thank you for your time, and I wish you all continued success. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Ivan. Ivan, over to you.
Thanks, Pooja. You are absolutely right. You summed it up so well. That concludes the industry panel discussion titled Democratizing IT Systems for Digital Switchover. A big thank you once again to all the members of this panel, Ashwin Yardi, Nanda Kumar, Rizwan Koita, Sapnesh Lalla, Sumit Sood, and Venugopal Arcot for taking time off from their busy schedule and sharing your insights with us. We wish you and your respective organizations the very best going forward. And last but not least, a big thank you to Pooja Jain for doing a fantastic job of moderating this panel with a lovely and bright smile. It was great to listen and learn from these bright minds and influential leaders and hear them talk about transforming organizations in the IT and ITES sector to achieve resilience and authenticity and help one reach the stage of customer delight. I am sure we are leaving with some very important takeaways. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe. Have a good day.